Hello, beautiful friends, and welcome back to the Radiant You podcast, a space for high functioning women to slow down, reconnect, and shine from the inside out. I'm Lisa Cole, licensed professional counselor, life coach, speaker, wife, mom, Gaga, and a fellow life learner. Around here, we're not trying to have it all figured out. We're getting curious. We're learning, growing, and becoming, and giving ourselves a little grace along the way. Today's special episode really did start with curiosity. Actually, it started with my babes. There has been this funny little question floating around our family for years. Gaga, am I your favorite? Or who's your favorite granddaughter? Who's your favorite grandson? Jocelyn and Millie have especially been asking me this question lately. Who is your favorite granddaughter? Then the boys, of course, join in too. And it makes me smile because my answer is always basically the same. I have a favorite Jocelyn, a favorite Millie, and then I continue down the beautiful list of babes. Of course, the bigs get involved too. Our own kids have joked over the years about who's the favorite. Their beautiful wives have joined right in, and our daughter-in-laws have a running joke that Shelley is my favorite. It's fun. It's teasing. It's our family. But those questions from my babes got me curious. Why do we want to know if we're the favorite? What happens when there really is favoritism? And what happens when being favored or not being favored starts shaping what we believe about ourselves? The counselor in me started thinking, and the Gaga in me started thinking. And then I started thinking about families, classrooms, coaches, athletes, teachers, friendships, and even the ways we rank ourselves. Suddenly, this little question that the grandkids were asking, that it wasn't little anymore. And then I looked at the calendar. Today is August 18th. 17 years ago today, Shelley saved our son Aaron's life. And I thought, wow, here I am thinking about favorites because of these funny conversations with our babes. And we're celebrating the anniversary of the day that our daughter-in-law, everyone jokes that is my favorite, became our family's hero. I didn't plan that timing, but I noticed it. And it made me want to dig even deeper into this idea. How do we recognize something extraordinary in one person without diminishing what's extraordinary in another? How do we celebrate someone's unique place in our lives without turning love into a ranking system? And what can favoritism intentionally or unintentionally do to the people around us? So today, let's get curious about favorites. So when does a favorite become favoritism? First, I like to think that it's a very important distinction. We aren't going to have identical relationships with everybody. We naturally connect differently with different people. One child may share our sense of humor. Another may have interest similar to ours. One student may be easy to engage. One athlete may respond immediately to coaching. And sometimes one person genuinely needs more of our attention during a particular season. Fairness doesn't always mean sameness. Favoritism is different. Favoritism becomes a problem when our preferences begin affecting the opportunities, patience, encouragement, attention, or treatment that we give people. And it isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's not, that's my favorite. Sometimes it's simply, who gets another chance? Who gets our patience? Who gets the benefit of the doubt? Who gets corrected rather than dismissed? Who gets another repetition? Who gets encouraged? Who gets trusted? Who gets told, I see something in you? And maybe just as importantly, who doesn't? And that got me thinking about what happens when we expect more from someone. As I started digging into this idea of favorites, I found something in the research that really made me stop and think. Studies have found that when children within the same family consistently experience different levels of attention, affection, or treatment, it can affect how they see themselves and how they develop. And interestingly, sometimes the child who is easier to parent actually receives more favorable treatment. That made me wonder, does the child who's easiest to parent sometimes get the best version of our parenting? And then I started thinking beyond families. Does the athlete who's easiest to coach get more coaching? Does the student who's easiest to teach receive more encouragement? Does the employee who's already doing well get more opportunities to grow? Not because we're intentionally choosing favorites, but because we're human. And here's something else. Research has shown that I found fascinating. Our expectations can influence the opportunities we give people. Wow. In one study involving basketball players, coaches expected certain athletes to perform better. Without necessarily realizing it, they gave those athletes more opportunities. And what happened? Those athletes improved and became even more confident. That really got my attention because think about that cycle. We see potential. We give opportunity. Opportunity builds experience. Experience builds confidence. And confidence can help potential grow. So what happens to the person whose potential we don't immediately see? That's the part I don't want us to miss. Maybe the question isn't simply, do I have favorites? Maybe it's, who receives the benefit of my expectation? And what about our coaches and teachers? Sports have been a big part of our family's life for decades, so this one really hit close to home. A coach may have 25 athletes standing in front of them. A few stand out immediately. They're faster, stronger, more coordinated. Maybe they've played longer. Maybe they're naturally confident. Maybe they understand the system quickly. So the coach invests in them. More repetitions, more correction, more challenge, more opportunities. And naturally, they grow. But what about the athlete who doesn't immediately stand out? Maybe he's a late bloomer. Maybe she needs somebody to believe in her before she can believe in herself. Maybe the talent is there, but the confidence isn't. Maybe that athlete needs 50 repetitions instead of 5. Maybe there's something happening at home that nobody knows about. Maybe the gift is still underground. And I want to be clear here. I'm not suggesting everyone should receive identical playing time. Standards matter. Efforts matter. Performance matters. I'm talking about development. Are we developing everyone entrusted to us? Or have we already decided who has potential? Teachers can face the same challenge. The smart kid, the gifted kid, the quiet kid, the troublemaker, the unmotivated kid, the responsible kid, the kid who's just not good at math. Labels make people easier to understand, but labels can also become ceilings. And sometimes we begin interacting with the label instead of continuing to discover the person. So maybe there's a question worth asking. Whether we're teachers, coaches, parents, grandparents, counselors, or leaders. Who am I continuing to discover? And who have I already decided I know? But there's another side of this, too. Even being the favorite can have a cost. Maybe you're the smart one, the responsible one, the successful one, the star athlete, the easy child, the one everybody says they never have to worry about. What happens when you're not okay? What happens when you fail? What happens when you're tired of being responsible? What happens when somebody else becomes better at the thing that has always made you special? Sometimes a label that sounds positive can still become something we have to live up to. And maybe that's another reason ranking people doesn't serve us very well. I started wondering, what does God say about all of this? Scripture is actually pretty clear about favoritism. In Romans 2:11, it says, "For God does not show favoritism." Well, there you go. That's pretty clear. But here's what I love about that. God doesn't show favoritism, yet he certainly didn't make us all the same. 1 Corinthians 12 describes different gifts, different kinds of service, and one body made up of many parts. That is such a beautiful picture. Different doesn't mean less. God doesn't need my gift to look like yours in order for both of them to matter. And then James 2 gets even more direct about favoritism. James describes giving the wealthy person the preferred seat while treating the poor person differently. And that made me wonder, who gets the good seat in my life? Who gets my attention, my patience, another opportunity? Who gets developed? Who gets noticed? Who gets believed in? And who might I be overlooking? And then there's another piece of this that really hits home for me. Sometimes we inherit these patterns. The Bible doesn't hide messy family dynamics either. Isaac favored Esau. Rebekah favored Jacob. Then Jacob favored Joseph. And we see jealousy, competition, hurt, and division ripple through those families. What we were handed down doesn't have to be what we hand down. Maybe part of why this subject matters so much to me is that I grew up with favoritism all around in my family. I know what that feels like. And I've tried intentionally not to hand that down. Not perfectly. I'm human too, but intentionally. And maybe that's part of becoming. Sometimes becoming means recognizing something that we were handed and realizing I don't have to keep handing this down. I can get curious about it. I can learn. I can grow. I can choose differently. And with God's help, patterns can change. And then there are the rankings we create for ourselves. Sometimes nobody else is ranking us. We do a pretty good job of that ourselves. She's prettier. She's thinner. She's more successful. She's a better mom. He's a better athlete. She's the favorite friend. They're closer. She has more followers. He's further ahead. He's doing more. She's doing more. We create rankings nobody ever asked us to create. And then we live as though they're real. Comparison starts asking, where do I rank? Let's ask a completely different question. What is mine to bring? What if somebody else's specialness doesn't diminish ours? What if someone else's light doesn't make ours less bright? What if there's really isn't one spot at the top? The invitation is to recognize those differences without turning them into rankings. To look at another person and say, I see what is uniquely yours. And maybe to learn to say that about ourselves too. Which brings me back to Shelley and 17 years ago. Remember our daughters-in-law having this running joke that Shelley is my favorite. Well, if anyone has a pretty compelling argument, Shelley probably does. I say that with a smile because on August 18th, 2009, our family's life changed. Aaron, our middle son, was 24 years old. Shelley was 22, his girlfriend of 4 years and a nursing student at the University of Michigan. They were hiking near a waterfall in New Hampshire when Aaron slipped and fell 160 feet. He hit his head on rocks and eventually ended up face down in the water. He wasn't breathing, and Shelley went into action. She got him breathing again. She used her swimsuit to bandage his head. And this 115-pound young woman somehow carried our 160-pound son down the hill. It wasn't a hill, it was a mountain. When she was later asked how she found the strength to do it, she said adrenaline and God. And I believe that. She shared with me that it felt enormous. Aaron was airlifted to Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center. Meanwhile, back home in Grass Lake, word was spreading. Our God-adopted daughter was one of the messengers who went from our home really quickly to go get Randy from football practice. Bruce, her dad, was trying to do whatever he could do to help. My mom and dad were racing around trying to figure out what to do. Our church began praying. Our town began praying. And all I knew is that we needed to get to our boy. Shelley's mom, Peggy, was even there with us. And we all, Peggy included, piled into my mom and dad's motorhome and headed to New Hampshire. My dad drove through the night. There was a short sleep break in a Walmart parking lot. And then we just kept on going. I remember the feeling, just get us to Aaron, just get us to Aaron. And somehow that motorhome got us there faster than the flights available to us could have. 17 years later, I still remember the fear and the urgency. But when I look back now, I also see something else. I see people showing up. Shelley was doing something absolutely heroic. All of us in Grass Lake were doing everything that we could. Bruce was helping. Alex was helping. My mom and dad, Peggy was helping. And my town, my beautiful town, was praying. It was just amazing how all of us just came together in that moment. Our community prayed. Everyone had a place in our story. And nobody else's contribution needed to look like Shelley's in order for it to matter. We don't all have to have the same place to have an important place. And maybe that's the distinction I've been looking for. Special isn't the same as favorite. Was what Shelley did extraordinary? Absolutely. She saved our son's life. There really aren't adequate words for what that means to a mother. Shelley will forever hold a very particular special place in my heart and in our family's story. She was a hero that day, and she always will be. But here's what I've realized through all of this. Favoritism says you're more valuable. Love says, I see what is uniquely valuable in you. And that's what I want my bigs and littles to know. You don't have to compete for one place in my heart. You already have your own. So Gaga, who is your favorite? Maybe it's appropriate to end where this whole thing began, with my babes. Jocelyn, yes, you are my favorite Jocelyn. And Millie, you are my favorite Millie. Ava, you're my favorite Ava. Lottie, you're my favorite Lottie. Brecken, you are my favorite Brecken. Easton, you're my favorite Easton. And Cooper, you are my favorite Cooper. And Aiden, you are my favorite Aiden. And the same is true for my bigs. Every one of you brings something different into our family and into my heart. I don't need any of you to be more like somebody else. I want to keep discovering who you are. And Shelley, 17 years later, I will never forget what you did. You saved Aaron's life. You are one of our family's heroes. And yes, you are my favorite Shelley. And before you go, maybe this week, you can all get a little curious. Ask yourself, who have I labeled? Who might I have overlooked? Who could use another opportunity? Whose potential might still be underground? Am I giving my best, to the people who are easiest for me? Or am I staying curious about the ones who are harder? And then maybe ask the biggest question. Where am I still trying to rank myself? What if I stopped asking where I fit compared to everybody else and start asking, God, what did you uniquely put in me to bring? Because we don't all have to shine the same way for everyone's light to matter. There is room for different gifts, different personalities, different abilities, different stories, different ways of serving, different ways of loving, different ways of shining. Maybe our job isn't to rank them. Maybe our job is to recognize them, nurture them, and give them room to grow. Thank you so much for spending time with me. If something in this episode encouraged you, challenged you, or made you think of someone, I hope you'll share it with them. And remember, we're all still learning, growing, and becoming. Give yourself some grace in that process. Keep getting curious. Keep noticing the unique gifts God has placed in you and in the people around you. And as always, shine your light and be the radiant you.